Lilo and Stitch. As much as we're probably all excited to look into this fan favorite, what I personally find to be the most interesting thing about Lilo and Stitch is how it kept Disney animation alive during one of their darkest periods. Sounds crazy, right? Well, let me explain. The 2000s decade was a pretty bad time for Disney. Computer animation started to become the dominant force of the industry, and the studio was no longer viewed as the powerhouse like back during their renaissance the decade prior. In fact, very rarely did they ever come out with a movie that made money, as some also became some of Disney's biggest box office bombs. But then there was Lilo and Stitch, their 2002 film made at their Florida studio in Walt Disney World, which not only did it do well when it was released in theaters, but it also became their next big franchise that spun off numerous of sequels, TV series, rides, and more. Actually, it was quite common at the time to see Stitch having as much presence around the world of Disney as much as Mickey Mouse and Tinker Bell. And it's because of this movie and how it became a merchandising juggernaut that proved to the company that Disney animation still had some great value during a time when they needed it the most. And the studio went on to maintain just a bit longer until they finally saw a new age where they returned to their former glory with a new batch of animated classics. So now that we're heading to Hawaii, should this movie be a part of our animated Ohana? Or is this just another failed experiment? Let's find out. The story. In a way, there are two stories that are happening at the same time. There's the plot with Stitch where, as a wanted galactic criminal, he hides on Earth disguised as a dog for a small family and does whatever he can to escape Jumba and Pleakley so that he doesn't get captured. The other is about two sisters, one a little girl and the other a young adult, whom despite their sibling-like conflicts and troublesome behavior, they do whatever they can to stay together, since without their parents, that's really all they have. The one issue I have that I'll say now is that the movie has some difficulty with handling the tones of each narrative. I'll give it credit that the writing does a good job with blending the two together so that the plot lines can work with one another in order to tell one fully consistent story, but the problem is that their tones feel like they're virtually opposites that don't collaborate well. You got the Stitch narrative that's meant to be more comical and a bit like a cat and mouse chase style cartoon, while the sisters' plot is a lot more serious and has a sense of pressure and dread always looming about the chance that they might lose each other. Not to say that their mood doesn't shift at times where the sisters can have their funny moments and the aliens can be somber, but it can happen when there's a jarring tonal whiplash where it jumps between Nani struggling with keeping Lilo and Stitch under control and Jumba and Pleakley bumbling around.
But... Yeah? Well, who wants to work at this stupid, fakey luau anyway?
But what about the plots themselves? Yes, I've discussed about how their tones don't necessarily match, but can they make the story itself work? Well, that'll depend on which one. With the Stitch and the aliens plot, I'd say that one is, at best, cute. There is a sense that it's geared more towards children, and as it does supply the most comedy, the jokes they deliver feel mildly amusing. Some of them can be funny, but they generally end up giving a decent chuckle.
Show us that there is something inside you that is good. Oh, naughty!
But then you have the sisters plot, and this is what takes this movie to a whole new level. While the aliens take care of the humor and the sci-fi elements, this presents the heart of the picture, where Nani and Lilo are doing whatever they can to stay together, despite having a hard time with everything, even when interacting with each other. The key to make their scenes work so well is how they depict their relationship in a way that feels true to real life. As they are sisters, they constantly fight to the point of almost being ready to destroy each other. However, at the same time, they also know that they need one another, especially after their parents died. And while realistically it would be better off if they go in their separate ways, they still try to do whatever they can in order to stay as a family.
Ohana means family. Family means
Nobody gets left behind.
Or
forgotten. I know.
And that's the big theme of this entire feature film. Family. It uses the meaning of Ohana as a driving force of the film, and what motivates Nani to make sure Lilo stays with her, and Lilo to have Stitch be well behaved. Speaking of which, even the times with Stitch can be heartwarming, where he starts to understand what family is and figure out what's missing in his own life. This is not to say that the alien side of the story is bad. It can be fun at times, but it does get easily overshadowed by the powerfully emotional impact of the sisters and how they try to solve their problems. However, when looking at the overall picture, the story is a lot like the lead characters as a family. Yes, it's not really ideal and a bit broken, but as Stitch says, it's still good. Yeah, still good. The animation. Amongst all of Disney's animated features, Lilo and Stitch stands out as one of their most unique looking, mainly because of how it goes into a completely different direction than what they usually do. Instead of sticking to traditions and maintain that classic Disney-style design that they've defined for decades, the movie went with director Chris Sanders' signature style, one that emphasizes the use of round shapes and avoid any sharp corners in order to make the visuals look more inviting. Of course, this style is very beneficial for the aliens like Stitch, allowing the animators to create a whole bunch of unique designs and all sorts of different creatures. Even the environment around them with the rounder aesthetic helps make the galactic elements feel otherworldly and technologically advanced. But the best creativity is when the characters move, and even with just Stitch, Jumba, and Pleakley, they make the most out of their own abilities and their distinctive anatomy as they navigate around Hawaii. As expected, that's what establishes the most creativity here. But, like with the story, it's what they mainly do with the elements on Earth is what feels the most impressive. The way that it brings Kauai to life feels both familiar and artistic, as if it's from an artist's perspective, which is the case when given the designs to the humans. Not only does the style look good on people, but they also gain the benefit of having the overall picture feel like everything fits in the same universe, where the humans and the aliens are distinctly different, but not too different where one looks out of place from the other. Also, even with a different design, there is still that Disney touch where the character animation on them is realistic in the sense that the subtle movements play a large role in selling the character's mood, and even well-researched with how they accurately portray fire dancing, surfing, and hula dancing. Also, one admirable element that this movie included is the use of watercolor for the backgrounds. Not only does it give the feature a visually light tone while filled with attractive looking colors, but it gives the feature this classic feeling that is very rare to find in modern 2D animated works, where it's like a throwback to how the backgrounds were painted in the golden age of animation. But then there is the use of CG, and this is one where I feel a little conflicted. I'll admit that the use of it does not work extremely well, not because the CG itself is bad, but because it feels out of place compared to the old-fashioned backgrounds. However, I could still look past that because the use only happens at the beginning before the title shows up, and at the end at the climax, which is still well done to build up the intensity and supply a high-flying chase scene. Even for a studio that always pushes the limits of the medium, Lilo and Stitch really got Disney out of their comfort zone with this new look, and the result is still the same by having the animation be amazingly appealing. The characters. As a movie about family, the big challenge is to have the characters feel like they are an actual family. Lilo and Stitch has the additional obstacle of having that family only consisting of 2 sisters. However, the aspect of how their parents are no longer with them is prominent, especially with how this affects the girls mentally. Lilo ended up developing behavioral issues, where she doesn't have a proper understanding of how to interact with others. Some may say that a lot of it is, well, she's just a kid, but that doesn't change how she went through a lot at such a young age and doesn't have the right guidance of how to act in the world around her.
You're crazy.
Please! Everybody calm down!
As for Nani, her life got completely crushed by the amount of responsibilities that she's been given. On top of sacrificing everything to take care of Lilo, she also has a hard time maintaining a job in order to be a proper legal guardian and always has the social worker Bubbles behind her back. This always puts her in constant pressure where it always feels like one wrong move and they'll both lose everything.
If you're not doing anything this...
David, I told you I can't. I got a lot to deal with right now.
I know.
Sure, they're technically not alone in this, and they sometimes get help from David, a surfer who has a crush on Nani, but it still doesn't change that their obstacles are next to impossible to overcome. As I said before, family is the only thing they have, and they're doing everything to make sure they can hold on to the only thing they can salvage after the loss of their parents. As much as they can barely stand each other, they know that they need each other.
I shouldn't have yelled at you.
We're sisters. It's our job.
Yeah, well, from now on.
I like you better as a sister than a mom.
In a way, I honestly wish that this was more Lilo and Nani instead of Lilo and Stitch, because their relationship is the core that makes the film so gripping and emotionally engaging to see that they're both doing their best to make sure that things can work out, even if they rarely succeed. But of course, this can't just be about 2 Hawaiian sisters trying to go through life. There are also alien characters who add a sci-fi twist to the picture, and the most prominent of them all is the other title character, Stitch. Initially, he was created as an experiment by an idiotic scientist.
I prefer to be called evil genius!
Solely for the purpose to destroy. In a way, he was meant to be a super weapon, but ended up becoming uncontrollable to the point that he escaped and crash-landed on Earth.
Maybe I could.
You're built to destroy. You can never belong.
But what a coincidence that he disguised himself as a dog and ends up getting adopted by Lilo. Throughout the picture, while hanging out with her, they're both simultaneously learning about improving their behavior and the importance of having a family. Even with the urge of violence and destruction, that can never replace the feeling of being loved, which results in having Stitch to feel conflicted about his own identity.
Lost.
As for the other aliens, Dr. Jumba and Pleakley serve as the comic reliefs, as they're assigned to capture Stitch, where one is the mad scientist and the other is the cross-dressing Earth expert, obsessed with preserving mosquitoes. As I said before, the humor can be pretty mixed where they can have a few funny moments, but they're generally not really effective and feel like there wasn't as much effort put into the comedy as much as the drama.
What are you doing?
Nothing?
Say, I want to try it on.
No!
Say!
Hey, Al! You're just jealous because I'm pretty!
For the most part, it's just the 3 main characters that play a prominent and significant role to the heart of the picture. Everyone else has a minor role where their personality is mostly one-dimensional. However, when they get the characters right, they present them beautifully to showcase a cast that can truly define Ohana. Like Nani and Lilo, the movie is obviously not perfect. In fact, it can be dysfunctional at times. However, its heart is true and has a strong, genuine feeling that it cares about family. And that's what makes this a beloved fan favorite. Lilo and Stitch may not look like the typical Disney film, but it perfectly captures the feeling of one to become a well-crafted and heartfelt animated feature. While the tone may be inconsistent and the humor can sometimes feel weak, the importance of family allows it to maintain an emotionally engaging story, beautifully unique animation, enjoyably charming and relatable characters, and of course, a powerfully touching message about the meaning of family. Alongside the Frozen films, this is Disney's definitive sisterhood movie, or even about siblings in general. It's definitely a fun watch on its own, but it's especially worth watching with other siblings, like a moment to bond and maybe even see yourselves in Lilo or Nani, or maybe even Stitch for the matter. There is no denying that the movie fully served its purpose. It kept Disney animation afloat during a time when they very much needed a hit, and it gave audiences a new Disney classic to love. By the way, are you having fun watching this? Well then, in case you haven't yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I got a whole bunch of Disney videos like this that I'm sure you'll enjoy, and I got plenty more awesome stuff to come. Just thought I'd let you know. Hey guys, this is Animat, and what a charming movie that we have just watched here. And you know, the funny thing about Lilo and Stitch is that I find it's a movie that is commonly referred to as people's favorite Disney animated features, or at least one of them. Now, of course, there will be those that will say that it is their definitive favorite Disney animated film, but at the same time, I find that with Lilo and Stitch, it is very common that people would put this movie either amongst their top 5 or their top 10 favorite Disney animated films. And honestly, I can completely understand why. Maybe for the reasons that are a little bit different than what I've mentioned in my review, and I understand if there might be some people out there who won't necessarily agree with some of the criticisms I say in my review here, but I completely get why people love this so much. Like, I completely understand. It's a lot of fun, it is very heartfelt, so touching, and it's just an absolute blast to watch. Like, as a movie in itself, it's still very good. Now, for me personally, maybe I wouldn't consider this amongst my top 10 favorite Disney animated films, but for others, I completely get it. And as a movie on its own, it is still very well done. So, definitely a great joy to watch. Alright, so with that said, I believe it is now time that we shall go and move on to a Patreon request. And this time around, we actually got a request from Russell Ray Young. So if you guys would like to be like Russell and you want to go and support my work and get some amazing rewards at the same time, including but not limited to seeing my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you guys would like to request an animated film you would like me to review and I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. Alright, so with that said, what is it that Russell has requested me? What is it that he wanted me to go and review? Well, funny enough, it's funny how I ended up reviewing Lilo and Stitch here, because with our next movie, we still are going in a similar theme, where it's still another Disney movie, and coincidentally, it is a Disney sci-fi flick. But this time around, we're going to go beyond the realms of Hawaii, and we're going to go beyond the realms of Lilo and Stitch. In fact, you could say that we are going to go to infinity and beyond. And no, we're not going to go with the Chris Evans one. We're going to go with the one before that.